We're working with belonging and fitting in. So much of the time when we work with that, we work with how I don't fit in and how awful that feels. Today, I wanted to kind of switch the perspective or the vantage point a little bit. How we fit in and how we don't fit in, how we belong and we don't belong, but also how we could move to really appreciating ourselves and our differences. And we all have experience with this on so many different levels. Prentice Hemphill. And one of the things I admire about Prentice and about other people who have that same, in a way, it's self confidence, but there's this knowing who they are. One of the things they said was, there is an unstoppable joy and freedom because I know who I am. She was talking about how just being queer and trans and how that is so under attack right now that we kind of forget what a joy and wonder there is as well. This is an area of belonging or not belonging that I've worked with for most of my life, certainly since puberty. Being an out lesbian and being treated a certain way, really feeling like I wasn't part of society. There's something quite intense about that, but also the freedom and the power of becoming known to people who are like me. Prentice talking about I'm part of a thriving ecosystem that encourages people to be free and to explore. As we move into our own courage around being who we are and knowing who we are, we keep that space open for other people in so many different ways. I was asking the question of most of the people I interviewed this year about joy. And she's saying, I feel joy when I feel into the gifts that I bring that feel inherent to who I am. So, one of the things that they're really valuing is that they're not the same as everybody else, really moving into appreciation for that. Our nervous system has a lot to say about our belonging or not belonging. We tend to feel more comfortable if we're around people who are like us. And we can explore too what makes it safe for us to show up as our authentic self. So sometimes we're in a situation where, in fact, the other person would welcome us to be more authentic and to maybe share more deeply because that helps to deepen relationships. There's a lot of internal things that are happening as well. Our own personal experience of rejection is a big one. When we know that in the culture that we live in, whether it's the mainstream culture or a subculture, that we don't belong there, that there are people there who maybe it's in our family or at the workplace who don't wish us well and don't honor our right to be who we are, who would make fun of us for having a learning disability or for having a differently abled body or all of the different ways that we have to fit into this kind of mythical norm, and that we can honor that these are things that get easier. Our window of tolerance gets wider as we heal. And also as we're around other people who appreciate us for who we are. So that's something that's operating all the time. We need to be comfortable enough in our nervous system for this to work. This is Dorothy Riddle, a psychologist who developed this Riddle Scale in 1974 for the National Organization for Women in the US. What I really like about it, why I keep kind of bringing it in every couple of years, is that most of us think about acceptance as being kind of where we're headed. Dorothy's saying, no, actually, acceptance is just barely acceptable. We have to move into something more than just, I accept that I'm different in this way, or I accept that this person that I care about is different in that way. We have to be able to move into really appreciating ourselves in particular, and then other people as well. But to be able to find that group of people where we can feel at home, where we don't have to hide who we are, or we don't feel like we're just barely tolerated. Like they'll accept us because, using the example of being queer in this day and age, it's kind of frowned upon to be homophobic in some circles anyway. But we actually want to be known for who we are and be appreciated for what we bring as well. There's a two-part inquiry. So the first one, we're going to look at ways that we feel like we fit in the norm, and bearing in mind that the norm is culture, it's mainstream culture. So if we're in a different environment, the norm is going to be different, but just the kind of the mainstream cultural norm. So I've just put a few different areas down here. As you're going through them, though, just notice which ones kind of spark a bit of energy in you. Which ones do you not really pay attention to? Probably because you're an insider in that area. If you're in a work situation where there's a lot of people with money and you came from an experience of poverty or financial hardship, or perhaps you still are, then you're not going to feel easy in that environment. You're going to be aware that there's a difference there. All kinds of different ways. So let's sit back and notice as I'm coming to the different ones what your response is and stay connected in your body around that. And that we don't have to shame ourselves. I know that's really easy to say, but if there is a shame response coming up, to maybe pause mentally, kind of go into your heart and offer yourself some compassion, this kindness. It's a really powerful experience to feel excluded, and we can include ourselves. And that's one of the first steps in this, is to bring ourselves into our own heart. So, level of social anxiety. It's not one of the ways that I had thought about much. But several months ago, I started thinking, someone who's really socially anxious, is that something where you feel like I'm kind of about the same level of social anxiety as most people? Or do you feel like you have no social anxiety or very intense social anxiety? Let yourself breathe into that. And one of the elements of that too might be having a past where you were bullied. If you have a past where you were really accepted into the mainstream at your school, and maybe you were even one of the power players in the school, one of the popular kids, your experience with what you expect in a social situation is going to be very different. Maybe that's something that would kind of come in as a pair. I know why I feel socially anxious, because my nervous system is always expecting the worst. Notice if you could take a few deeper breaths, that would help to maybe ease what's here. Notice if you have any tightening in your jaw, maybe the back of the neck, upper back, shoulders. What's going on in your body? Maybe it's your body size or the way your body works. There can be so much shame around that. As a person with a larger body, I've experienced a lot of that kind of discrimination and the assumptions that people make about me because of my body size. It could also be someone who's very thin or has an illness or fibromyalgia or something that makes it hard for their body to function. So notice if there's something in that kind of topic or area for you. We're just kind of looking at, what am I going to work with in the inquiry in a minute. We're looking to see, where are some of the hot spots here for me. If you're a person of color, absolutely, that's part of your experience of moving in the world. If you're in a situation where there's a lot of other people or even another couple of people of color, then there's going to be a different experience than if you're in a predominantly white situation. Heteronormativity is another one. If you're not heterosexual, if you're anywhere on that range, that continuum that's not heterosexual, then you don't fit into that norm, that assumption that is less prevalent now, but is still pretty strong, that most people are heterosexual and that that's the right way to be. Anything outside of that norm, there's something wrong. Of course, that's not true, but that's one of the ways that conditioning, that pressure to conform works. If you don't fit the norm, there's something wrong with you. And this can happen in very different environments, of course. As we're going to go into the inquiry, you might want to pick one of those. For these inquiries, 10 or 15 minutes, we probably don't want to do a 10 out of 10, but whatever comes up that has some juice that you want to work with. The Riddle Scale has repulsion, pity, tolerance, and into acceptance. And then from there into support, admiration, appreciation, and nurturance. So, whatever area that you're thinking about, bring that to mind. And inside of you, how comfortable are you with yourself in that area? So, someone who has a higher body weight than what is considered normal might have a lot of, or some leftover repulsion. We don't feel like we're okay or there might be some shame that's kind of associated with this. If you're the one who feels socially anxious, how do you feel about that? What's your relationship with yourself around that? And many of us have done a lot of work to come into acceptance of whatever it is that our differences are. Probably most of us aren't on the far end at repulsion, but if you just kind of sense into those, have you moved past acceptance into support, whether it's you or another person that you're thinking about with a similar issue? Admiration, appreciation, and the nurturance. One of the ways she put that was, I view my differences with affection and delight. Let's spend a moment or two kind of feeling into that. This one particular thing that you're looking at, where are you on that scale? And another way to bring in another component of this is to look at, were you also outside the norm in this particular way several years ago? So if this is something that's kind of new for you, or is this something that you've been aware of for decades? And maybe this is something that you've really opened into in the last little while. So 10 years ago, maybe you had a lot of trouble accepting it, and now you feel way further along on the appreciation, the admiration. How is this coming in historically? We're always working with these levels of conscious mind and nervous system and unconscious mind. If our experience was that we were unable to accept this, or that we were rejected or socially ostracized for this, that's still going to be in our body, in our nervous system, in our unconscious mind. And you might have had a lot more experiences now of being accepted and being appreciated. And notice, if you want to, you could bring in someone else that you really care about. And if they were in this situation that you're in, how would you feel? Where would you be on the scale with them? Try to stay regulated, stay with your body, your breath. Notice the thoughts in your mind. And if you were to go into this inquiry, it's a reverse inquiry statement that we would wish that was more true, perhaps. I view my differences with affection and delight. What does that bring up in you? Now, what would have to change? But maybe for that person that you care about, or for yourself, what would have to change for that to be more true? Whatever the specific differences that you're working with. I view my differences with affection and delight. Let's sit with that for a bit. And maybe there's some inner critic coming in. So that might be what might have to change a little bit. I'd have to stop shaming myself for this. So we could notice when it comes up and we could look at that and maybe offer ourselves some compassion, some kindness. I view my differences with affection and delight. What does this difference bring to me and to the world? What is wonderful about it? What makes our life richer because of it? It could be a lot of different things. It could be I have more empathy for other people who don't fit in the norm than I would have otherwise. I have more courage. What is it for you that has come from this being different or being outside the norm? What has been really helpful or that you really appreciate or delight in about that? As we're coming towards the end of the inquiry, notice if you could have some compassion for yourself. It's really difficult. In our nervous system, we're hardwired to want to fit in. And to have an experience of being not fitting in or not belonging is hard. Could you offer yourself some appreciation and kindness? Whatever area in which you don't feel like you belong or don't fit in. But that's been a journey, quite a difficult one at times. And there's also some huge benefits. Maybe that's led you to find some people who are like you that are really great to be around, maybe missed out on otherwise. But it's hard. It takes courage, it takes nervous system strength and resilience. Could you offer yourself some patience and tolerance and compassion?